Okay, everyone, if we're going to take our seats, we'll have the next presentation. We'll start right away. This next one is Arthur Van Wagenen. Is that how you say it? Yeah. Okay, from Excel Studios. He's a new product director. He has a background in legal. It came from, it said MirrorLake Films, correct? He's going to talk a little bit about distributing films and what they're looking for in films and in filmmakers. So I think this one's a really important one for filmmakers because distribution is very important to get the movies out there, also to make enough money so you can make another movie. So let's get a round of applause for Arthur, and then we'll turn the time over for him right now.
So what I thought we'd do today is just, I'm going to start and give you guys a little bit of background about who I am, where I came from, why I'm here working for Excel, and then talk about a little bit about our process in terms of selecting films. I know Jed, right?
Yeah.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So I know a lot of you guys, so let's just do it. I think I've even met Garrett before, back in the day. I don't know if you remember that. Hanging out with Joe Pia. So it's just a good chance to kind of talk about what I'm doing and what that relates to you guys. And then I just want to talk about movies. Maybe we can have a little bit of a philosophical discussion about the kind of movies that I like and the kind of movies I hope the Excel begins to distribute. And then we can just open up for questions and just kind of have a conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I kind of grew up in a film family, a film house where, every Sunday it was like, my dad would drag me in front of the laser disc player and say, Arthur, you got to see just watch the first 5 minutes of this. Watch the first 5 minutes. So I was always watching movies. My dad's a filmmaker. He was the first executive director of the Sundance Institute and started the Sundance Film Festival back in the day. And then he and Robert Redford got in a big fight over a film called The Giant Joshua and decided to not talk to each other again. There's a great book written on it called Down and Dirty Pictures, The Rise of Sundance and Miramax and independent film. It's kind of interesting read. So I was always kind of like just some dumb kid skiing on the slopes of Sundance while my dad was trying to set up that institute until he wasn't, and then he's gone on to make some films. And I was always fascinated by the industry, interested in the industry, but just too chicken to actually become a filmmaker. So I went to law school. Ended up, after my undergrad at BYU, I went to the University of Utah, took all the intellectual property and entertainment law courses I could.
Well, there's a conflict.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Almost cost me this job. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I kind of came at it from the legal side. I went out to Newline Cinemas in LA and clerked in their business and legal department for a semester and kind of saw the dark side of the studio system just as Newline was finishing up their third Lord of the Rings film, but they were kind of still at the height of their powers before Warner Brothers kind of brought them back down to size, and got some good experience there. Came back and practiced for 4 years with a good attorney named Joe Pia. So he taught me a lot. And we did all the business and legal work for a handful of independent, low-budget features. My girlfriend's boyfriend with Alyssa Milano, Age of Dragons.
Kai and Jason.
No, they didn't do Age. They do dragon movies, but not that one.
Jill.
Yeah, it was a Jill movie with I was trying to think of the actor's name. Danny Glover.
Danny Glover.
Come on, guys.
That's right, Ryan
So,
Little. He shot that.
Even The Mine, which is here playing Jeff Chamberlain's film, we did a lot of the legal documents on that and got his production company set up, the film production company set up with SAG, did a lot of the agreements to get the production company set up with the unions to be able to go and make their films. So then I got, but it's hard in Utah to sustain an entertainment law practice. We're not in New York or LA, so I ended up doing a lot of litigation, a lot of insurance defense work, and it was nasty and ugly, and I hated it. So a former client of mine and I started to talk, and they're a little production company in Salt Lake called MirrorLake Films, and I went and worked with them for 2 years, producing a reality show for BYU TV and doing an independent documentary on the revolution in Egypt, which we're still in production on. So did some production work, and then this Excel thing came along. Excel had been, I think a lot of you have, I won't give too much of the background, but it was a fairly successful entertainment media company producing music and film and distributing film, which was bought by Deseret Book in 2004. And when it was bought, they said, you know, the LDS church that owns Deseret Book said, yes, you can do that merger, that acquisition, but XL cannot put production dollars into film. Film is too expensive, it's too risky. You can distribute them, market them, but you can't make them. And that mandate is still in place today. So a lot of people come to us and say, you know, can you help me make this movie? And we say, we'd love to, but we can't. We're just kind of on the back end. That may or may not change based on a whole bunch of different circumstances, but for the time being, it's safe to assume for all the filmmakers in the room that XL doesn't have production dollars to spend. So that was in 2004, and then they had a couple of misses financially, to be quite frank. They lost some money on some movies. And it was a very, very small operation. It was shrunk down from what it was before when Randy Davis was in charge and running it. And it's still very small today. We're 6 people. And those people split time between music and film under the Deseret Book umbrella. And so it's a small group, and we've kind of, some new life was breathed into the entity when 17 Miracles was released and made some money. And then Ephraim's Rescue is coming out this summer. We hope it'll, you know, do nearly as well, if not as well. But they had 2 music guys, really, Bob Hollander and Dave Brown were running kind of the film side of things, but they didn't have anybody really exclusively focused on film, which is why they started putting out feelers, and that's where I ended up coming in. Yeah, and it was, my University of Utah credentials were questioned for sure. Jerry D said, yeah, every once in a while we let a Ute and or a Democrat, usually one and the same, into our building so that we can meet our equal employment opportunity quota. I said, I don't know if that's a protected class, but sure, I'll have to dust off my BYU diploma to get in the door every day.
Except that half the GAs graduated from you, so
yeah,
that's all the joke.
Yeah, exactly.
We repented.
She was joking, and she's great. But I've only been there for 2 months.
Wow.
And the part that is simultaneously wonderful and terrifying is that they haven't really told me how to do my job. They've just said, find us movies that make money and that are good movies. And that's really the only mandate or directive. So that's a little bit of my background. I wanted to ask you guys, what perceptions do you have of XL? I know my predecessors have been down to this festival before, and they've spent a lot of time defending XL, rightly or wrongly. And no doubt about it, there's been, you know, it has, I think, an ambivalent reputation among filmmakers, and some of that is fair criticism, but I don't want to really get into any of that today. I want to talk about moving forward, but I think in order to kind of build a platform to talk about the future of XL, it's helpful to kind of know what the expectations or perceptions are as filmmakers are approaching us to say, do you want to partner or distribute a film with us? It's helpful for me to know what the expectation is of who we are and what types of films people think we are distributing or should be distributing.
So they haven't given you any directive on what kind of films? I mean,
so
you have this.
So I don't think I'll be releasing any rated R films.
Okay.
That's probably a safe criteria, but beyond that, no.
So does the church have specific, I mean, outside, does Shadow Mountain play into this at all? Or
Shadow Mountain is the music side. So XL is really the film side now, and they don't play into it.
There's perceptions that I've heard from some filmmakers that when they sign deals with either Deseret Book or now XL, that they pretty much lose a lot of their rights to their actual piece. Is there? That's one of the perceptions.
You're going to defend this for me?
Well, so we did a distribution deal with Excel last year for the Book of Jeremiah, which is a web series that your father actually helped us get going in BYU Broadcasting years ago, so, which we are appreciative of. And so before we made the deal, we called a lot of filmmakers in the area to sort of get their sense once who had worked with Excel. I'm not going to name any of them because I don't think it's relevant, but the response that we got from across the board was consistently angry. And we had had good interactions, personal interactions with Excel up to that point, and so, and we've had some other distribution deals in the past where we felt like we weren't going in cold in terms of that, and so we did it anyway. I probably wouldn't distribute with Excel at the moment, having gone through the marketing and sort of experience after that. And I don't want this to be an attack thing, because I'm really glad that you're here to have the discussion.
Well, yeah, let's be frank. I mean, Christian, when I was an attorney, tried to get me to sue Excel. Huh, Christian?
I don't think that's really true.
You'll have to talk to his new attorney about that.
There's some sort of power attorney-client.
I think
He didn't, but
there's no point in suing anyone, really.
yeah, I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad we didn't sue him. But let's be clear about what it means to do a deal with a distributor, right? You're giving up rights. What you're doing is you're saying you have a copyright as the filmmaker, as the creator of the film in your film. And when you do a deal with a distributor, you're giving up some of those rights. I mean, that is the nature of the deal in exchange for a way to make revenue, a way to generate revenue. And the distributor, in order to be able to take your film and make money with it, has to have those legal rights. They have to have, and as a filmmaker, you actually hold all the cards initially because you are the rights holder, you're the copyright holder. And you can just say, I'm willing to give up, this territory versus that territory for this length of time, right? Those are the key points in any distribution deal. What territories am I giving up? What rights and what mediums am I giving up, and for how long? And then at what price, right? What's the split? Does everybody kind of understand the basic components of a distribution deal?
And there needs to be clarification up front too about what your budgets are going to be going right at the head. When you're going out to do a release, a lot of filmmakers I don't think understand that's money. Yeah, that they're going to put $100,000 into ads, but they get recouped that first. And a lot of people I don't think quite get that right up front. At least from when I was in distribution.
I think the perception for your original question is that Excel puts together an incredibly glossy product release and gives your title top shelf treatment at all of Excel's accounts or whoever they sell it to. I don't know that we comprehend the cost of that as filmmakers, but we see any title on the shelf and it's either Excel or some other title, and Excel is always the best looking, best, glossiest, widest release.
Well, yeah.
In this little area.
Well, let me give you a couple of thoughts come to mind when you say that. And again, this is a kind of a chance for me to talk about Excel and being really brand new to it, right? I have the luxury of not having all the baggage that maybe the company has with it, and some filmmakers have with it. But there is a cost to it, and I sort of am coming to this from the filmmaker's perspective because I used to represent a lot of filmmakers, and I have been a filmmaker. And one of the hardest things to do, to negotiate and to make sure was very clear in any distribution agreement where I was representing a filmmaker, was putting a cap or a ceiling on the distribution expenses. And I do feel confident saying that Excel has never been shady or dishonest, but I think they've made some misjudgments in terms of their expenditures and thinking a film, warranted a certain P&A spend that it maybe didn't warrant, and maybe made some miscalculations on that front. But I do want to, so that's one thing to keep in mind. And as a filmmaker, yeah, you've got to go in and protect your investment, and part of that is negotiating with the distributor to somehow control or limit the P&A costs, because those do get recouped by the distributor typically, right? There's all sorts of creative ways to make a deal. Typically first, before, and then there's a fee on top of that, and then the filmmaker starts to get their money back. Slowly, sometimes not slowly. 17 Miracles made its money back very quickly, and they made more money than Excel did on that movie, to be honest. And then the other thing to talk about is the types of films, right? And that's where I want to kind of steer the conversation about what are the perceptions about the types of movies that Excel can or should be distributing.
So I have a question about that, and maybe this analogy is wrong, but in my opinion, Excel's not necessarily different from any other distributor, and I consider them all the devil. As a filmmaker, it's like, you know, it doesn't matter if it's Sony Pictures, it doesn't matter if it's Lionsgate, it doesn't matter who it is. You sign a 60-page document that says that they're only going to take 35%, but they're going to take that 35% after they've made the $10 million that they spent on advertising that you have no control over, which is paying an executive this or that. So my question in that is, does Excel have goals to separate themselves from that pack of what I consider Hollywood's dark side?
So I mean, a couple of rebuttals. One is, how else are you going to get your film out there, right? How else are you going to make any money or have a chance to make any money? And a film that sits in the can is worth nothing. I mean, we make movies so that people can see them, right? And then, I mean, the other part of the message today is that, the philosophy that I really adhere to and that I've been pushing since I very first got hired 2 months ago is Excel has got to be in partnership with the filmmakers. Yeah. I think that's the problem that has plagued all distributors, but also Excel in the past is, and frankly, there were enough, you know, a few years ago, there were enough new feature films, LDS content and made by LDS filmmakers, that Excel could sort of afford to burn some bridges, frankly. I don't think we can afford to anymore. I don't think we could afford to then, but we did, or we may have, and that was probably a little myopic. But for me, the film is the thing. Like, that is it. It's not about Christian as a filmmaker or Excel as a distributor. It's about what is the best deal for that movie. And if we start to make deals where you might not make your money back, film is risky. Sure. I mean, who was I telling today about my dad mortgaging our house when I was a little kid to get his film done, right? It's a super risky business. And look, I'm not an expert. Hollywood are not experts. You know, 80% of their films, 90% don't make money. They distribute bad movies that are financial flops all the time. So it's still a risk. But that said, if we don't make deals, and I've told this to Sherry Dew and my direct boss, if we don't make deals with the filmmakers that give them a chance in hell of making their money back, we're doing something wrong and we're thinking too myopically. If we don't make the money back, we start to lose a pipeline of product and relationships with filmmakers that we depend on for our livelihood. Christian.
I mean, in defense of any distributor, Excel too is, you know, a lot of the filmmakers that we have in the community, well, first of all, they're first-time filmmakers, and I mean, you can see a filmmaker, it's like a mom, you know, and their film is their baby. And moms look at their babies or their kids as something that's extraordinary and better than anyone else. So there's obviously a misperception because there's a lot of emotional time and all that effort that goes into making a film creates that kind of relationship to your own film, and it's distorted. And a distributor is a business. They look at it as a product, and they take it and look at it and say, what kind of money can we make off that? And this is where you have the discrepancy. They look at your baby as a product and say, how can we market this? How can we exploit this? And often to our own benefit. Now, my question is, this discrepancy exists, and I think it caused a lot of the anger or whatever it's called. It caused a lot of the thing because you have the filmmakers that offer their baby to you, and often distributors have a certain negligence towards that baby because they have other kids to take care of, and maybe they favor other kids a little bit more. And so you have all that kind of thing going on, and I think it creates that conflict because of that. And so on the one hand, you would have to babysit the moms because they really invested in these films. And it's kind of an irony that Excel or Deseret Books say, well, this is too risky, we don't invest in films, we can't pay for the production of films. There's all these filmmakers that do and take that risk, but then at the end of the day, it seems like they become like this, well, we take your product, we leave us alone, we'll take care of it.
Less of an orphanage, and more of a kidnapping.
That's the question, how can you create a different kind of synergy or a different kind of relationship, because that's the Hollywood relationship too. And the only way is, if the filmmakers are the ones that put in the risk first, how can get I mean, and then Excel says, well, we're a business, we don't want to take any risks where we don't know, we're not covered. So I think it's almost unsolvable, and that's what I'm going to throw back.
I mean, clearly we take, and then you're next. Just to respond a little bit to Christian's question. Clearly, Excel takes some risk, but I mean, I think it is incumbent on the filmmakers. You guys are always going to care about it more than any distributor, and Excel included. You're right. I don't have the bandwidth to care as much about your film as you do. I never will.
Yeah. So how can that bandwidth or that kind of energy, the caring energy, how can that be plugged into the Excel apparatus, so to speak, and actually be utilized in a productive and positive way that makes the filmmaker feel like I'm part of this, and makes Excel not feel like leave us.
This goes back to the partnership premise and philosophy that I think we at Excel have to continue to nurture and push, but the filmmaker has got to be engaged and has to be involved. And yeah, I know that in the past maybe we've said, thank you, product, now just let us go market and distribute it, and we'll get back to you, and we'll send you a producer report in 6 months. I don't think that works, particularly with the smaller types of films that Excel's been releasing. I think we have to have the emotional and the insight that the filmmaker brings.
But the filmmakers have no
marketing.
They have no marketing knowledge. They have no clue.
But they know their film, and hopefully they know their audience before they get into the film.
On that subject, I think part of the problem is if they bring a film comes to you and you look at it and say, I can't really market this. This is a small market. Everybody knows each other. You should be involved at the beginning. They should be coming to you with a script and saying, and the screenwriters and the filmmakers should be willing to sit down and take some criticism. I've worked on some local films, and frankly, the scripts were awful. And as a technician that works for them, I have a decision to make. Do I just bite my tongue and get paid and work on their awful film, knowing that they're producing something that is not really sellable? I'm not the distributor, so that's not my job, but I always feel guilty. I think, and I talked to Bob about this a couple of years ago, I think there's a responsibility in a market like this for Excel, who is selling almost exclusively local films made by filmmakers, LDS filmmakers, to talk to them about quality of the film before it's shot. Say, you know what? This
Before the
film has
investment is
potential,
made,
but
absolutely.
This is an awful script. We have one of the top script consultants in the nation living in this county. And I talked to filmmakers who've written the script, and I say, have you run this by somebody? No, it's pretty good. I'm happy with it. Seriously.
And even worse, their investors.
Dave
Even worse, their investors aren't that sophisticated about the business, and so there's no sort of extra set of eyes. I agree, and we would love to see scripts from a very early stage. I know there's not a huge incentive to do that for filmmakers because we're not putting money in necessarily up front, but.
And I don't think you should have to, but I think there's a responsibility. Okay, I come from a technician's point of view. I've worked on a lot of films, and I see films shot here that, in fact, I've talked to producers, they call me up and say, will you work on my film? In fact, I had one call up and say, I can't afford you. That was the first words out of his mouth. I said, well, let's talk about it first. And in the end, he didn't hire me. But problem is he told me that we're setting our budget based on what we think we could make through Excel. And I said, are you serious? That's your bar? You're making a film? And he says, well, then we're making two versions, one for the LDS market, one for the non. I said, you gotta be kidding me. Are you telling me either that LDS market can't watch a good film or that no film with LDS content can be sold outside of Utah? That's a farce. So what my words to Bob were, is there a way you can sit down with filmmakers and teach them how to make their scripts universal? You can have content about this culture as a backdrop, but have a universal solid story, it'll sell anywhere. I mean, anywhere. And I think the local filmmakers have set their bar really low. And if you're the marketer or you're the distributor for a lot of those films, you need to help set that bar higher. You don't have to spend any money doing it. You should be involved in the filmmaker's process way before they bring it to you.
Yeah, so films, yeah, the better the movie is, the easier it is for everybody to make money off it. That's
exactly.
True. And the script is the cheapest and earliest place where you can start to
exactly.
improve the content.
is there are filmmakers here, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings who's in the room, but there's filmmakers here who are making film after film, and their budgets are so low, they're paying technicians way below rate, so low they can't make a living, and they're leaving the state or quitting the business, and that's ridiculous.
But one of the reasons why producers, I think, have to do that is because of maybe the lack of partnership with a local distributor like Excel. I've heard of a lot of filmmakers recently doing deals with Covenant rather than Excel because of things like first dollar in the deal, so that there is an immediate partnership up front, that whatever, you know, the distributor acknowledges working in Utah isn't working in Hollywood. And the audiences and the amount of money that's available isn't Hollywood. So let's sort of throw out the standard 30% model that the Sony Pictures can get away with, because Sony Pictures has their Sony Pictures, and they can do media buys and they can do everything on a scale. But I've heard a lot of people moving towards Covenant because they're doing a deal that's not as common, to try and make that more of a partnership.
Can I make a comment? I am Covenant, so.
Okay. You've got good buzz.
I'm Ron Bruff. I'm creative director of Covenant. I handle all the film things.
We should just trade places and let you get.
Because I haven't met you yet, because you're new and I've been busy on some films, but every single deal we do is unique. And so we sit with the filmmakers and ask them, what is it you're after? And I come from a film background. I've produced a dozen documentaries, and so I think like a filmmaker, and then I have to fight with my boss, who's a finance guy. And
I hate those guys.
And it's always a battle between the two of us on every single project. But the thing you do have to watch in this market is, we get people bring in films and they say, I've spent $1 million on this film, and you're like, and it's very specific Mormon, and you're just like, great, you won't get your money back. And come with us, but we can't make that money back. If you have a low budget and it's a very Mormon film, then you can get your money back. If you have a more universal story and we can then distribute it outside of Utah, we can do some deals in LA and some deals in the Christian market, then we can get a bigger budget back. But we always look at the total reality of, and like Christian said, we're business people, and we're in it to make money. I mean, that's the first thing my boss will tell you. We're in it to make money, and we'll tell you what kind of deal we can do. But just like Excel, we can't put production dollars in it. We're blocked from that, so.
And frankly, if Ron can give you a better deal than me, then do what's best for the film and go make a deal.
Well, that's a good thing that we have a little bit of.
Or vice versa.
Covenant is also Deseret Book in the end.
Yeah, we're a Deseret Book company too. It's like we're the same,
So there's a
owned by
certain
the same
monopoly.
people, but
Well,
run in
not
different directions. So.
Can we turn the corner into the future?
I wanted to find out what you've been trying to steer the conversation into the types of films. Because we all say, hey, why can't we make our money back? What types of films does Excel want to
So
make?
this is to.
Can we hear from the Australian person?
Yeah, Darren's been.
Well, I
he's had his
just
hand up.
something you said maybe take note. Our film, The Playbook, we had that script in with Excel and Bob Ireland very early in the piece because it was originally going to be an LDS film, and Bob said, "Look, we can't put money in," and I said, "Look, that's fine, but we'd be great if we, when it's done, we could get it distributed." And during the course of the drafting, Bob came back through his channels and said, "Look, we don't like this, we don't like that," and even when we got to the rough cut, one thing that slipped by me, the mum in the film had quite a bit of cleavage, which we made a point to make it look like the dad had garments on to signify LDS, but we totally forgot about the mum, and so we had to cut around the mum's cleavage quite a bit, and
More cells.
yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, when we had the final draft go to Excel, they didn't pick it up, and that's fine. I'm totally fine with that. They had their reasons, and one of the reasons was that they felt it wasn't LDS enough, and which we changed it from being an LDS film to a generic film with a few little LDS references, so LDS people would still identify with it, but it wouldn't turn off like, say, the Southern Baptists who have a thing against LDS. So we were hoping to pick up, both markets. And yeah, what you said was very interesting, because we did have our script and we got a lot of feedback from those guys, and it kind of helped us guide it along the way, and we drafted like 14 times with some input from those guys.
And that implies, though, that the people looking at it, and this is the direction you're going, actually know what you're talking about. In other words, like you said, no producer in Hollywood is an expert.
Exactly.
But some have more experience than others, and so as you talk to somebody in Excel, hopefully they do know what they're talking about and are giving you the correct information on your script. But I think that's all very important. I just came from Sundance doing interviews for one of the cable companies, and we interviewed some of these young filmmakers who are just out of college from all over the country, and they're making films that could have been LDS films, and they're incredible films. I just feel like this community has the bar way too low, and they're not thinking beyond that. It's the Utah Valley mentality. Well, we'll make it just this good and make our friends and family happy. We should be making stuff for the world, and there's no excuse for not.
But how many films did you watch that cost $100,000?
Of those films we interviewed, about 6
Yeah, but that's
of them.
Sundance, that's a festival. A lot of these films never see the light of day either.
These were 3 that won awards or are being looked at by the Academy. I'm serious. I think we have a problem in this valley.
I agree.
So the question then is, what do you want to see? I mean, I just did it.
And to help this discussion, I think Excel has to raise the bar as well, and we have to be able to say, this isn't good enough to get to a wider market. The only mandate that I've heard from anybody when I came onto the company was, we've got to reach hundreds of millions is the term, and we're not going to do that making films exclusively and only for the LDS market.
Okay.
Well,
But we're
so
past that.
it doesn't.
This is a discussion from 2007.
Yeah, but the problem.
I agree with
Christian on that.
The problem is still
No,
here.
no one wants to make LDS content. Everything moves away from LDS content, and we see that for years now. This is not new, and this is.
You don't have to
But
move
it's also
away
not-
from LDS content. You have to handle it correctly. There's plenty. I got lectured by a producer out of Vancouver. She said, "You guys don't understand yourselves. You have a beautiful culture, a texture. It's a great backdrop. There's hundreds, thousands of films about Jewish people, Catholic people, Muslim people that make fabulous films. That's the backdrop. The story is universal. The culture is unique. And the problem is the films out of here are about Mormonism.
A lot
They're
of
not
these
about.
wonderful films are government-funded, subsidized, highly subsidized films. There's Iranian films that the government puts millions of
Those are all
dollars into being
excuses.
made.
I'm sorry, those are excuses.
Hey, all right. So to take it in a different direction, yeah, we all need to make better films. Okay. So what's Excel going to do? What's Excel going to do to better their distribution channels? That's one of my big concerns. Is are you getting direct deals with Redbox, with all the different major outlets,
The digital-
where you're not going through a
VOD,
sub-distributor?
digital, all those
Yeah.
which aren't existing at the moment.
That's what I'd like to know is what's Excel gonna, what's your future on that? Are you
That is
gonna
it.
develop those relationships to make it better for the filmmakers who go with you?
Yeah, I mean the answer is absolutely yes. And we did. We were nationally in Walmart and other big boxes with Airborne Creed.
Well, and Walmart's not a hard one to get into. So I'm wondering, like all the other channels that are out there.
But we have
what's
to,
Excel gonna do?
we have not done a great job digitally.
Yeah.
We've just hired somebody to focus exclusively on getting our back catalogs and
Which is
future,
great for you guys,
future catalogs
you know? There's a
digitally.
demand for that.
Christian mentioned it in his presentation. I mean, DVDs are dying, and we have, I don't know, maybe another 5 years with DVDs. And so we've got to figure out, just like every other distributor, just like the studios, how to make money digitally and not
Yeah.
in
Well,
different platforms.
And the reason I bring it up too is because you
And
look
not
at
only
like
that,
Candlelight.
but it's a tough sell for me. So I would love to pick up the types of films that you're talking about at Sundance that are first and foremost good stories, right? Human stories, uplifting stories, but are not dogmatic, that are not preachy, that are not. It's not good enough to, just because a film is clean does not make it good.
Exactly.
And that's the very first message from my perspective. Great if it's clean, but it has to be good before, just
We've had
because it
some
doesn't
film
offend.
shorts come through this festival that were shot outside of this area that were incredible. They just stood out, and I thought, what is it?
Yeah.
Well,
What is
So there's some
happening?
stuff. So, but to go back to Jeff's point, the difficulty, and I didn't want to bring up Excel's history or past, and there have been some good films. If you go look on our booth, there's some highlights of some movies that were some decent movies that have come from the community and were released by Excel or anybody else. But if a filmmaker from Sundance, if I were to approach him and say, you know, Cal, I loved your movie, Beasts of the Southern Wild, I loved it. Let's go. We should distribute your film. They would look at our precedents, at our history, and go, why would I release with you, right? Do you have access to those other channels? Do you have can you get to a national market with this kind of film? Can you treat it right? You've done mostly religious, and not only religious but specific LDS content, right? So we have to start thinking bigger and reaching into those other channels. It's a process that we're just starting. I've only been here 2 months. Give me some time, Jay.
Well, no, I just posed the question to get us out of that other conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's a fair question, and it has to start happening if I, as the product director for film, want to start distributing. And look, there's always going to be a place for 17 Miracles and missionary films, right? But those are going to be, by nature, smaller movies and smaller, you know, distributions.
So you're one film away from Summit Entertainment. The first thing they did was Down and Derby, and then they got Twilight. So, you know, are you really interested in taking something global?
The answer is
also a production house, though.
But take Miramax. Miramax started out, you know, just doing concert videos and foreign stuff, and then they had Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and then they were making their own movies.
That book is about the building, the rise of Miramax, what you described earlier.
Art, I think that, like, what you're saying from the beginning is the whole philosophy of true partnership. I think that if you fix that, if all your decisions are guided by that concept and philosophy, I think huge improvements will be made. Because if I believe, you have to believe. And if you care about my investors,
and if you win, he wins.
Then we all benefit because we're going to get them paid back. We've talked about this, you and I. So I think that that's key. True, that's the philosophy you're going to go after. I think that has to cover all your decisions, the way you approach everything.
I agree, and for us to feel like a partnership, it's a worthy partnership, not in the legal sense, right, but in the what's best for the film sense. You know, it's got to be a good movie. It's got to be a good movie.
And I think, oh, sorry, I'll just my last thought, and then as far as content, you know, Garrett and I went to this really fun director's workshop out in Maine, and it was. There's this one line that stood out to me the whole time. This guy that taught it, his name is John Kent Harrison. He's done some pretty good films. He said, the problem with you guys is that you have to realize that it's by the light you write by. You can go make a horror film, but it's by the light which you write, which will raise your content to a human level. If we are culturally indulgent, it's not going to work. It's by the light within you that you write, which will make your content universal. So as long as we have that light, I could go make a horror film and still have it be an uplifting experience.
Yeah, I agree. Who we are as a people, right, as an LDS people, should be reflected in everything we do. And that means we shouldn't be satisfied with putting out crappy content, right, from a production value standpoint, from a story standpoint especially. But just because it's by and about and for Mormons is sort of, that's not good enough, right? It may be by and about for Mormons to start with, but in addition, who we are as a people and as a culture has to say, look, we're going to put out the best stuff we can because of who we are. I want to let Harry talk.
I was just thinking that just with what you're saying about, you know, the filmmakers, if they bleed, you have to bleed, and you as an XL, you need to be on board, and you need to be, as the baby thing, it needs to be a baby for you as well. I mean, I think absolutely it needs to be more of a two-way street, because filmmakers can't, I don't think you can come to you with a film that's complete and say, have this, be passionate about this. And that's why I think it needs to be that process, that building a relationship from the start. And if a company like yours can get to people's films early in the scripting process, help them become better films together with them, and you're going to be more passionate about it. You're going to want to sell it to a wider audience. The filmmaker's going to be passionate about what you're doing, because it's, instead of it becomes their film that you're selling, it's your film as a company and as a filmmaker that you're sort of selling together. And I think that would probably help add to everything, help make it better, more people involved. And once you start becoming a sort of a team, that sort of team kind of feel, I think that will push the films above and beyond.
Can we get him a sweatshirt, and can he just take my job from here on out?
No, he's working for me for a while.
Hold on.
He should be doing this.
In this idea of partnership, and we may be on
But
the same.
but it's right. I mean, if it comes to us late in the game, I haven't spent the 5 weeks on set, and I haven't spent the hours in the editing
No,
room.
what
I
I mean,
haven't.
the quality will improve if you have returning filmmakers.
That's what I was
Because
just gonna say.
filmmakers that make, see, the
This
learning
is-
curve that Scott went, or Darren went through is huge. The first feature is a learning curve that it's, and you should be able to put it aside and go to the next film, because it's just tremendous. And we have, this community is growing because slowly people start making other films. So you have to learn the craft, and you only can learn it by doing it.
But if you burn your
can talk it all day
investors-
long, but you learn it by doing it, by learning from mistakes, and by the experience of others too. But it's a huge learning curve to do first film, and if it just dries out, investors don't make their money back, there's no other support system. It's just, there's too many filmmakers that had a huge learning curve, could go out and do it again, but will not for 10 years. And that's where you lose a lot of the creative energy. And if there's any way to solve that, so that that span to the next film gets shorter, you will have better films, better quality, and all that kind of stuff.
That's true, because you have this tacit knowledge that is acquired through that process that gets thrown out the window if they can't repeat it.
And then the next new
add
guy
on to it.
comes, and he gives you a
That's why
film.
we've got to do
Yeah.
deals that have a chance in hell of making the filmmakers
Yeah.
their money back. It might not, but we've got to do deals that are not exploitative.
Most of the,
and they have a chance.
if you go to the DVD cabinets of most of the LDS in Australia, you'll probably only find films by Christian, TC, and Hailstorm. So, there's not many others that reach down to Australia as well. So
that brings up the risk. I just put together an interview with Naomi Fuller Gyllenhaal at Sundance, and she did a film.
Sorry, you put together a what?
An interview of her talking about her film. She's a first-time director. She's obviously a Golden Globe screenwriter, and her film has Dakota Fanning in it, and it's about two girls that decide to lose their virginity before they enter their first year of college. And she talks about, which is horrible for us, and we're like, oh great, thanks for bringing the female perspective to that. We don't want to know about that. But what she said really hit me hard, because I do come from a marketing background. I graduated from BYU in marketing and a minor in film. And they taught us that if the change is jingling in your pocket and you're afraid that you're going to lose it, you know you have something that's got potential. And she said this in her interview. She said, if you're not willing to take the risk, if you're not willing to I'm trying to paraphrase how she said it. She's like, if it's not worth risking, then it's not really worth doing. If you're not willing to take that risk and you're not really afraid that you're going to fail, then you'll never be successful. So are you willing to find those films that maybe are risky enough for you to go, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. We could totally lose our shirt here, but it could be Twilight and you could make $100 million.
So I'm restricted in being able to risk, actual money, but I think we have to risk. We have to take risks from a content perspective, or we will fail, and we'll just always be a little bit limited if we don't take some risks.
I think in the box that you're in, the risks will be practical
So
nature of your risk will be.
I can't take a risk on a rated R movie, but there's
I mean,
and
there
the
is
structure of the
content out
contract
there
to
that
pay back the investors and.
well, there's risk on the business and legal side, right?
Yeah.
But you can't really separate it from the content and the quality of the film either.
So what style of film?
Oh, let's talk about a couple. So I would love to say.
Original question, which is what types of films?
What types of films?
From your perspective.
So
Excel.
yes, well, I think we always have to take a look at the Mormon films, right? The By and About For, and 17 Miracles is a good example of one that can work. Why did that film work? I don't know. Maybe it was timing. People were kind of ready for something. It struck a chord. It certainly wasn't the first period piece.
It's not T.C. Christensen's first movie either.
It's not
That's
his-
a guy
it's
who's,
not
like
his first
Christian
movie.
said,
Yeah. It's
has
not his first
developed
movie.
and had
Right.
opportunity after opportunity. to get
But in addition, I think about films like, at the end of the day, we're still a company that needs to provide value-based entertainment, but I don't want to underemphasize or underestimate the entertainment part of this, right? In order to compete, we've got to, Mormons are pretty modern, pretty hip. They're pretty mainstream. They're going to spend money to go see The Dark Knight. They're going to spend money to see it. We've got to make stories that are entertaining as well. So that is a key. But I think of value-based. Value-based for me is not, okay, there's no swearing in it, so that's a value-based film. A value-based film is something like Searching for Bobby Fischer. right? It's a brilliant little movie. It's not a big movie, big probably still for our standards, but it's about innocence and becoming, and you know, retaining our innocence and being childlike. That's a value that film does not preach or hit you over the head with. It presents that through a good film and a good story. The Impossible that just came out, you know, that again, a big movie, big special effects budget, but that's the best film about family values that I've seen in a long time, without being didactic and without being preachy, but that's a family values film.
Do you think the Deseret book, mommy shoppers, are on the same pages?
No, they're probably not, and that's where the risk comes in. If we make films just for those people, we'll always be fairly small, and unless your budgets are micro budgets like Christian talked about, it's going to be really hard, and like Ron talked about, it's going to be really hard to make your money back if we only make and sell movies to that demographic.
Well, and that demographic's dying off.
BYU TV is in exactly the same boat you are. Their market, they had somewhere between 10 and 50,000 homes out of 60 million who have BYU TV that were watching, and they were generally mothers at home watching TV, and they said, well, we love them, but they were told specifically that you need to become an entertainment entity now, so they're trying to produce product that is universal but still uplifting. Yeah. And that's their attempt this year.
And it's hard. I mean, it's a hard challenge for filmmakers. I mean, I get the sort of conundrum when you say, you know, values based, or it should be uplifting but still entertaining. Has anybody seen This Is England? It's my favorite film of the last 5 years. Probably a sub $2 million film made in the UK, government subsidized, Christian. You know, but it's a powerful film that looks at ideology in the world, and when you're confronted with certain ideology, clash of ideologies, how do you reconcile that? It's sort of a coming of age film. So there's all sorts of films that I think are value based, but are not necessarily overtly religious, and that can appeal to mass audiences. It's a huge challenge, you know. It's a huge challenge. In the back, yeah.
Yeah, I do have a question, but I don't know if it's been addressed. I walked in a little bit late, so please.
We'll shoot you down if we've talked about it already.
Okay, good. But you know, I've got a friend who's a filmmaker, and he says that his biggest problem with Excel was your contract. It was absolutely terrible. It was one way, one street. It protected Excel and basically raped, excuse the French, you know, the producer. And that's been probably within, you know, 12 months. And basically, in simple terms, it gave you everything to the first point. In other words, you would actually have a profit before the producer would get anything. And then if it wasn't enough profit, then it would go to video, and you'd still have a major profit on that, and the producer still got nothing. Have you guys made any changes to that? Are you aware of that? Is your contract today the same as it was a year ago?
That sounds like a standard distribution deal
real life.
to me.
You're not going to get that.
That's the
same thing you're going to get anywhere else.
And I think that might be the problem, though, because it's a small community. Deseret Book is owned by the church. At this point, the only product that Deseret Book is likely to get is from this small community. And maybe once they grow for this vision, right, then we'll be able to attract more people. So that being the case, it seems like it's in the best interest of everyone to deal with each other differently than we would in the outside world, which, of course, there's a standard business practice, but as you acknowledge, its ethics and the way it maybe jives with the way we see a gospel brotherhood doesn't exactly
and certainly
fit.
if and I don't know which project or which contract, but if that contract doesn't make sense for the film, then I think potentially it was structured wrong.
Well, it's like it was your basically strong contract that makes a lot of sense for Excel. They get rich. Producer starts at death. The owner of the film starts at death until a certain point. Yeah. So in other words, you basically,
without knowing the contract specifics, in principle and philosophically, I think it's the wrong type of deal for us to make going forward. I'll say that much.
And I tell you, another example, Pirates of the Great Salt Lake, a friend of mine made that film, I helped produce it. It was sold to Weinstein. They got an advance of $200,000, never saw another dime. It was probably to fulfill their Hollywood or Blockbuster agreement. They never even saw a statement, statement or any kind of statement.
Yeah,
So-
we can spend the rest of the time throwing the Weinsteins under the bus.
Yeah, go watch Shark Tank. If you haven't seen Shark Tank, go watch
I'm
Shark
just
Tank.
saying
The business
it's-
world isn't any different. Those are savvy investors. That
Mike.
Arthur, I was just kind of wondering, as far as your mandate, are you being like actively pursuing projects, or are you being reactive? Are you waiting for projects to kind of come to you and fall into your lap, or is your mandate to kind of sniff out some of these things that you might feel meet this new revamped vision for Excel and kind of run with those?
Yeah, we need to be proactive.
Is the publishing arm that way? Aren't they pretty, do they hunt out
You know,
writers,
I don't.
or they wait for the writers?
You know, I don't know. I just haven't been there long enough to know that world well.
Publishing companies, there are so many books submitted.
They don't have to look.
It's cheaper to write a book than it is to make a
We develop
book.
things in-house, and both divisions do. We develop things in-house in publishing. But you have to understand, we'll get 1,000 books in 2 months.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like just pick out the best ones,
Yeah.
and the rest you reject.
So,
You have a history, though. It's
with the 4 minutes left of our time, let me just underscore a couple of points. One, we're serious about the partnership vision for films. Okay, at Excel, the way Harry articulated it was absolutely perfect. That may influence deal structures. I imagine it would influence how the deals are made. Number two, we're interested in LDS content if it feels new, if it doesn't just feel hashed and or rehashed and tired. I think that's why sometimes we kind of just go through these waves as LDS cinema. We want to see things that are about LDS themes, LDS specific content, but just know that the market is limited to that in that sense. And as we start, if you've got an idea that is not LDS, doesn't have a missionary in it, or doesn't have a home teacher in it, we still want to look at it, and we're trying to develop new ways to get it broader and wider.
I thought, film producers, they actually self-distribute, even if they don't do very good, they actually will pull back a little bit of return, and they may not recoup their investment, which is greater than if they would have gone to Excel. Excel, nothing. But they self-distribute. So I'm basically looking for someone who's self-distributing and partnering up with them, with my films and their relatives' films, and maybe put Excel out of business.
Good luck. That might make sense for your movie. That might make sense for your movie. And you should do what's best for your film. Absolutely. I agree. We should do what's best for your film. I don't want to, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about documentaries. Documentaries have been a bit of a tough sell for us. They have not moved well, and I think that, again, that's a cultural thing we need to change. We need to sort of get the word out that Excel and or Covenant is a place to come get quality documentaries. We're trying to build a bit of a library to sell documentaries as a genre, as opposed to just trying to sell an individual documentary, but to get the word out that I'm with a documentary background. I just think it's important that we get good documentaries out to our customers. So that's also on our slate.
Is there a push at all for digital distribution in Excel?
Yeah, we're just
things on Netflix?
we're behind the ball. We're behind the curve, but we're moving in that direction, and we're more than scratching the surface. We're pushing hard to try and make money in those channels. So, good discussion. My card is downstairs.